Someone is saying that there is an alternative to dismantling the Holy Roman Empire. I'm not sure. I haven't tried it. I've only dismantled the Holy Roman Empire by controlling the electors. Um, but imperial authority is important if you're playing as the emperor, obviously. The initial reforms are good for everyone, but as it goes on, it'll start becoming worse. For example, Hofgrecht gives -5 cultural tradition for all the Holy Roman Empire members, while the emperor gets increased cultural tradition and a bit of a infamy boost. But at the end, you can eventually renovito imperi, which you can create the Holy Roman Empire as a single state, and but that's at the very end once you've passed all these imperial reforms. Yeah. So that's it from the Holy Roman Empire. Again, if you have questions, just ask. Yeah. More importantly now is the Papacy, which is right below the Holy Roman Empire. By the way, if we're playing in China, they have their own. A large Chinese dynasty has their own button, which I'll maybe talk about later. And Japan also has their own for their Emperor Bakufu, Emperor Shogun relation. But for Europe, we have the Holy Roman Empire and the Papacy. So for the Holy See, we can currently see that Milan is the current controller of the Holy See. So they're the Pope. The Pope has several different powers, like the ability to call a crusade against Muslim or heathen. And they can also excommunicate other Catholic players. And that's very bad because not only do we get a ton of disadvantages, but we also, everyone can declare war on us. As the Pope as well, as the controller of the Curia, you have a lot of different benefits, which I'll talk about later. So it's very good to be the controller of the Papacy. Over here we can see who's next in line, most likely by percentage. So England is 9%, Milan is 6%. This is out of 10%. So we can see that we're 6%. So we can take steps to increase that. And that's through papal influence. Papal influence will change depending on our innovative versus narrow-minded, which I'll talk about later, and on how friendly we are with the papal states. So it's always good to get chummy with the Pope. And your cardinal chance is how likely you are to get a cardinal. So you can see in green is our cardinal, Osorio from Burgos. Not that it really matters where they're from within Castile. And yellow means they are controlled by Milan. So obviously, the more cardinals we get in, the higher chance we are to get the Pope. Okay, the higher our percentage will be, and this all depends on cardinal chance, which depends on how many Catholic provinces we have and our papal influence. Yeah, so that's the Holy See. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And by the way, the Papal States has their own province here, Roma. They also control Romagna, so we can ally with them, declare war on them, whatever. In fact, you get a bonus as a Muslim player to capture Roma. So it plays a huge part in the game. So both the Holy Roman Empire and the Papacy. Before I go on to the rest of these, I'll quickly talk about this. Find province. Right here, you just click on anything. If you can't find a province that's been talked about, like let's say Moskva, I can just click on it and it'll take me directly to it. Or go back to Lisboa, which is Lisbon. I'm taken directly to it. I can go to my capital province and to my national focus. I'll talk about both of these later, but if I'm far away, I can immediately go back. This is the menu and ledger. I'll talk about ledger later. This is the history of Castile. Obviously, we haven't begun the game, but Enrique III's reign began in 1390. So currently there is nothing. So due to the lack of anything of note, Enrique III is known throughout history as Enrique III the Silent. But as we go on, this is a collection of everything you've done in-game. And the plus or minus, zoom in and zoom out. You can just use your scroll wheel, though. I don't know anyone that actually uses these. Okay. Moving on. This is perhaps the most important button right here. This is kind of your country overview. Everything that controls your country on a more macro scale. Up here we have Manpower, our name obviously, Castile, Manpower. Currently we have a manpower of 20,000. Each cannon, soldier, horse unit is made up of 1,000 troops. So whenever we produce one of those units, it's going to take 1,000 off. This has slowly increased over time, but especially with the newest version 5.2, it's a very careful commodity. So over time, your troops will replenish themselves if they got damaged during a war, but make sure that this is always above 1,000 at least to be able to replenish properly. So it's very important. As you can see, if you hover over it, everything you hover over, you can get more information about. Like what's increasing it. So feudal monarchy, our government type, increases by 10%. Quality versus quantity subtracts by it. So it's very important to keep it at least above 1,000. And then if I have, right now I have 9,000 troops, 8 plus 1, 9,000. So it's important to keep it above 10,000 in that case, on a general level. This is our stability. Right now it's +1. Stability goes from -3 to 3, including 0. So at +1, we get advantages, like all of these: national risk, interest, yearly merchants, merchant chance, so forth, are increased. But if this was -1, then it would be the opposite. Everything would be in negatives. So obviously that's bad. 0 doesn't give you any advantages or disadvantages, but to implement policies and everything, it's very important that you're set to above +1. All the way up to +3 is always the best. If you're in -3, you cannot declare war. Your country is in basically a state of anarchy. So always steer clear of -3, as much as you can, of course. This is how much money you have currently. You really cannot go below 0. If you go below 0, you immediately get a loan, and that'll bring you above 0 again. Yes, yeah, someone's just asking me a question about stability stats. Yes, I mentioned that. So there's all these different ones: national revolt risk, interest, merchants, compete chance. These are all increased, and they're better off. I'll talk about them more in detail, like what each one of these mean, when we get to the national overview up here. I just want to go through this first. So that's the ducats we have. Currently, as we can see, we're decreasing 3.5 per month, which is fine, but because at the end of the year we're gaining 115, so we're set. So we have a net gain of 72 annually. I'll talk about this more later on. Prestige is very important. It controls a lot of different things. Like stability, when it's positive, you get a lot of bonuses, such as stability cost modifier, yearly diplomats, compete chance. All of these increase, even fort defense, when you have higher prestige. Over time, prestige decays, so it's not going to stay. If I stop doing prestigious things, it's going to decay down to 0 eventually. But doing things like controlling cardinals, winning wars, different cultural things, cultural projects will increase your prestige. It's also important. Prestige is important for making alliances, and diplomacy. Obviously, countries that you have a higher prestige with, than, they'll respect you more. This also goes back to trust for the Holy Roman Empire as a factor. So prestige is a very important thing. Prestige maxes out at 100 and will eventually decrease from there. Infamy is very, very important. It is crucial that Infamy does not go past 35. As you can see, currently it's 0 out of 35. It is very important that it does not go above 35, because at 35 you'll immediately start getting very nasty events, large-scale revolts. People might declare war on you, and you get infamy by basically being too greedy after a war. If I take up too much territory after a war without proper justification, I'll get infamy. A bit of infamy is fine. I mean, in fact, it's normal. You are going to get infamy. Just make sure it does not go over 35. Too high infamy, once it becomes red, like after I think 25 out of 35, for example, that will also start affecting your relations with other countries. Over time, though, it will decrease, and there's a lot of things you can do to decrease infamy. As you can see, our current ruler decreases it. The amount of controlled cardinals in the papacy decreases it. So right now it's decreasing by minus 0.6 yearly. Our infamy limit modifier really depends on our ruler and our legitimacy and several different factors. Obviously a higher infamy limit is always good, but this will also decrease over time, especially as the game later on in the game. Next is legitimacy. Legitimacy only applies for monarchies. Only applies for monarchies. No, we can't set a password for the TeamSpeak channel, shamefully, because this is just a public one. Yeah. But yearly legitimacy is very important. At 100 is the maximum. Basically, this means how much your monarch is respected, how much he's recognized as the true heir. I'll talk about this more later on, but again, having very high legitimacy gives you a lot of different benefits rather than a negative one. And so, like national revolt risk, stability cost modifier, infamy limits is increased, tolerance of heretics and heathens, and tolerance of the true faith. So legitimacy is very important. If we become a republic or presidential democracy or something like that, something without a king, this will disappear and legitimacy no longer matters. But for personal unions, like unions between Castile and Aragon or historically Austria-Hungary, it's important that you have a very high legitimacy to maintain that. What's a current country with a personal union? Poland and Lithuania, for example. As we can see here, Lithuania is in a personal union with Poland. So it's very important that Poland keeps up its prestige and its legitimacy. And of course, Denmark is actually the very big one here. Norway and Sweden have the same monarch as Denmark. Lithuania has the same monarch as Poland. So it's basically led by Denmark. I cannot do any diplomacy with Norway, or barely any. I can declare war on them or send them gifts, but I can't get any royal marriages or offer alliances with them because they have the same king and I suppose foreign relations as Denmark. Or in the case of Poland, Lithuania has the same foreign relations and king as Poland. So if I want to interact with Lithuania, I have to interact with Poland. And this all comes down to making sure that your prestige and legitimacy are high. I'll talk about how to get, how to claim a personal union later on, because we're going to have to do that with Aragon anyway, or at least the way I like to play. Next, we have the 6 different agents. We have merchants, colonists, diplomats, missionaries, spies, and magistrates. All of these max out at 5. You can only have a maximum of 5 at a time. Right now we have a maximum of 5 diplomats, 2 merchants, so on. Merchants are who you place inside a central